All right, I just got finished up watching SummerSlam 2013, and I thought I'd give my thoughts on it. This is Mr. Sanders, and let's go. The SummerSlam kick-off started off with Dean Ambrose versus Rob Van Dam for the WWE United States Championship. The best thing about this match was the crowd. The crowd was hype, and I love how they reacted to all the wrestlers. The pace control and the crowd control was actually pretty smart, and Dean Ambrose's and Rob Van Dam's offense actually seemed to complement each other very well. But it has a couple of the same problems that some of the other pre-show matches have had, like the mid-match commercials and the shorter time. But you know what? There were some suspenseful pinfalls, and for a TV. And for a match that was free, this wasn't bad. It was just completely outclassed by the last time's much better tag team match. And the other thing that kind of held it back was the ending. Just fucking DQ when someone interferes. When Roman Reigns comes in to break up the pinfall after a 5-star frog splash. Ambrose retains his title, but Rob Van Dam wins. The match was above average. That could have ended better. I gave it a 6 or 7 out of 10. Most likely 6. Yeah, and this was a really bad way to open the show. Kane versus Bray Wyatt. I said these matches usually aren't very good. They just look cool, and that's exactly what we got. The match, the imagery looked really cool, but you could very much tell Bray Wyatt and Kane were very uncomfortable working in the match, and it was kind of hard to tell what was going on at times. The most interesting thing about the match was just like the Wyatt family outside trying to figure out ways to help Bray, who's on the inside. And they eventually did come up with something much clever, and I kind of like their attempts at just trying to solve that. But other than that, it's pretty much just a crappy match that's kind of cool, Yeah, for a match that started the show, it sucked pretty badly. I gave it a 3 or 4 out of 10. We probably needed something faster than this. Now, they brought out a new panel for this pay-per-view, and I don't like that these guys really didn't do all that much analysis, but the main thing I didn't like about the panel they have up there was that all the guys were veterans, Booker T, Shawn Michaels, and Vicky, or should I say, non-active wrestlers. I think they need to use the panel to, bring out stars that you don't get to normally see. Anyway, shortly after that was Cody Rhodes versus Damien Sandow. The biggest problem with this match was the fact that it wasn't very long, although I will give credit to Damien Sandow for giving a good opening promo before the match to set the stage for what happened. Both guys, for people that are supposed to be intensely angry at each other, they actually did show it pretty well because both guys acted more aggressively than usual. And Sandow, I noticed, pulled out some moves that are pretty unfamiliar to his previously displayed arsenal. And Rhodes actually did that too with the mother of all surprises, a Samoan muscle buster. Got a pretty good reaction from the crowd. Rhodes wins in what I thought was a satisfying back and forth match, but it wasn't particularly long. It's above what you'd see in a normal TV match. I gave it 6 or 7 out of 10. Next up was Alberto Del Rio versus Christian for the World Heavyweight Championship. I gotta say, after Cody Rhodes versus Damien Sandow, they put on some very, very good video packages that set up the stage. And I love how they put on so much weight on the career of Christian before this. And this has to be one of the most surprising matchups for chemistry I've ever seen. ADRs does actually a lot of his traditional moves, just in ways that you don't normally see, like on his enziguras in strange positions. And I sort of like the idea of ADR gaining, or should I say Christian gaining momentum, and then ADR stopping with moves that just feel like they hit much harder than anything else. And I think this worked particularly well because both ADR and Christian did a great job of selling the other guy's moves. And you know what? It became easier and easier to root for Christian in this match because after a while you just start to sympathize with the guy who's taking these brutal, brutal kicks from Alberto Del Rio. So yeah, it's pretty clear to see that Alberto Del Rio and Christian have some really damn good match chemistry, and the pace of the match just continually escalated at a very good rate. The match this match has had a really good rhythm, and it was really, really good. Not intensely epic. I think it could have been a better match, but you know what? Pretty damn good for what they did. Alberto Del Rio wins the match in an armbar after a very good ending sequence. Not truly epic, but very good. I gave the match 8 or 9 out of 10. By the way, I should also passively mention Cody Rhodes won the match before, which I don't think I showed, and Bray Wyatt won the match between Kane. I probably should get into the habit of doing this more. And what was really interesting was ADR's post-match promo. Like, he looked like he was trying to be smug, but at the same time, it also really looked like he was trying to be a babyface. He was like, "This is for all the Latinos in Los Angeles," which, because they're in Los Angeles, he actually got a pretty good reaction out of that. And then after that was like a Maria Menounos promo. I'm assuming this has to do with the E-show, but I had no idea what was going on. The funny thing is that because I also need to mention that Miz opened the show saying, "Are you ready for SummerSlam?" Thankfully, he didn't have that heavy of a presence, but what I thought was kind of funny was that sporadically sprayed out through the show is that when Miz interviewed someone, Fandango would absolutely out of nowhere just start dancing for no reason, and it was always so amusing, and it ended before the final match where fucking Miz just decked Fandango and knocked his ass out. It was actually kind of an amusing mini feud, and it's an interesting way to kind of continue a feud or maybe start one without necessarily having a match. You know, face Miz not being in a match is probably for the best. Next up was Natalya versus Brie Bella with all the entourage of E-people. This was somewhat average Divas action with just a few different moments. You know, it's pretty much just an above poor match that had a few things in it that were kind of neat. Just a few moves from Brie and a few moves from Natalya that really stood out, but really not much else did. Natalya wins with a sharpshooter. I give the match a 4 or 5 out of 10. Then there was this backstage segment where apparently fucking Ryback is like chilling out, eating food, which I guess his old slogan was "Feed me more," but this is dumb. And that's what I wrote down. That segment was dumb. After that was fucking hell, man. Punk. I think Punk has like. I think if I hadn't accidentally deleted that list I was compiling of the best matches of the year, Punk would probably have the top 5 of the top. Or no, at least has like most of the top 5 matches of the year so far. Because this might be my top match of that year. CM Punk versus Brock Lesnar. The opening video package, you know, set up everything, which and I'm do liking these video packages in this night. Like they actually did show everything they needed to, you know. So good on the editing team. So hopefully Kevin Dunn has been improving. The very, very fast start pretty much established Brock Lesnar's incredibly aggressive and just monstrous style. I mean, this entire match, just the presence of Lesnar's weight and everything he did just felt so much harder against the guy as small as CM Punk. And it was crazy how far he could throw him, how hard he could hit him. And it really felt a lot more believable than you might think. And the match was just intense from the start. And you know what? You see a lot of scenes where, like, Cena or somebody's like not tapping out or something. I gotta say, Punk, the way he carried himself and the way he just fought against Lesnar, honestly, that showed more heart and tenacity than most other wrestlers have even shown. And you know what? This actually showed some really good pace control. Like from a very fast start that got everyone hooked, they kind of slowed things down, but also, you know, showed, all right, you know, Punk can do this, but Lesnar has his number because of power and all these other things. But then, fucking hell, after that basically second act, Punk started to fight back. The match was just so much fun to watch, and the crowd was so reactive that it was just awesome. Punk actually pulled out some things I didn't expect him to. Like, he actually pulled out some traditional MMA moves against Lesnar, which, as a way of sort of matching what he did, sort of makes sense. And near the end of the match, there was actually much more interference from Paul Heyman, but the thing about Paul Heyman that I think has always been kind of underrated is the fact that interference from Paul Heyman for some reason never feels forced, and just because of the way he'll always sort of scream when he gets hit or whatever, it's always enjoyable to see what he does. Lesnar wins the match by hitting CM Punk with an F5 onto a chair. This was a great match that had so much variety in its style. I gave it 10 out of 10. Next up was Dolph Ziggler and Kaitlyn versus Biggie, Langston, and AJ Lee. This was clearly a filler match. there are some moments with the fighting between Dolph Ziggler and Big E Langston that you can kind of tell that they have better chemistry than you'd think they would. And with previous matches with Kaitlyn and AJ, they have better chemistry than you'd think they would. And it was this is pretty much a good match, a good short match that did what it needed to, that just had a really hard act to follow. Ziggler pretty much was put into a position in which it was impossible for him to steal the show because he's sandwiched between two great matches, which I'll get to later. I gave this match a 6 or 7 out of 10. Dolph Ziggler won by hitting the zigzag on Big E Langston. And after that was a Miz segment, which I already talked about, where he fucking decks Fandango. It was kind of a funny ending to that whole mini feud they've been doing. And finally was the main event. John Cena versus Daniel Bryan with Triple H as a special guest referee for the WWE Championship. This, I think, was the perfect complement to CM Punk versus Brock Lesnar. CM Punk versus Brock Lesnar sort of established, savage monster, beatdown on skinnier technical guy who uses speed as his strength. Well, John Cena versus Daniel Bryan did something similar, but there's also that sense out of John Cena that he wants to prove something rather than just absolutely beat the crap out of somebody. It started off in a very ROH way, which you can kind of tell Cena's trying to say, yo, stop telling me I only know 5 moves. And you see Cena pull out some moves that are kind of unusual to his offense, like a powerbomb very early in the match. And I gotta say, Cena and Daniel Bryan do actually complement each other pretty well, and the crowd fucking adored Daniel Bryan. And even Daniel Bryan, he pulled out some of his lesser-known moves, much like John Cena had. The pace started out really slow, which compared to CM Punk earlier, started out at, like, guns blazing, whereas this one took its time and then let everything just keep building up, which, is not exactly my favorite style of a match. But you know what? The best thing you can do is not imitate the other thing if you want to get better. Yeah, and what surprised the hell out of me was Daniel Bryan actually won clean over John Cena with a running knee. He hit the knee in 1, 2, 3. The celebration went on. You saw John Cena shake Daniel Bryan's hand, and the celebration went on. And then fucking Orton came out with a briefcase and stuff. And then, you see Daniel Bryan in there, and it's like, come on, bring it, son. And then Orton starts to back away a little bit. Bryan's like, oh, come on, man. And then fucking out of nowhere, Triple H turns fucking Daniel Bryan around and hits him with a pedigree. And then Orton slides into the ring, hands him the Money in the Bank briefcase. Triple H calls for the bell. And Orton pins Daniel Bryan 1, 2, 3. And so Daniel Bryan was unfortunately only champion for about 4 minutes, and the new WWE champion, Randy Orton. Now I'm sure some people are gonna fucking bitch and moan about this shit, but as I said, CM Punk, basically the 2 matches that are basically the main events, Punk and Lesnar and Cena and Bryan you can kind of tell they're both intended to keep feuds going. This is why CM Punk lost the match against Brock Lesnar, so he can come back up to whip his ass, although I gotta wonder how they're gonna top that match. And here you see Daniel Bryan have a guy basically steal something from him, but it also sort of fulfills the basically background feud which was going, and it's like, hey, see, Vince? But now we're both satisfied. Although Vince did not come out and show his approval. So, yeah, this is going to be interesting where they're going to go with this. I'm wondering whether this is going to be purely a Daniel Bryan and Orton feud, or whether John Cena is going to be interspersed here. I don't remember another Daniel Bryan Randy Orton match, but I would think they would actually have pretty good chemistry, since Orton also has that sort of savagery style at times, although he's not big enough to really dig it in. But I gave the match itself here 9 or 10 out of 10. It was as good of a match as it could have been. I think the only thing that really stopped it for me was the fact that it's not exactly my perfect style. It had a lot of really good technical stuff, a lot of great hard-hitting shots, and And just seeing John Cena use moves that he almost never uses is always interesting. Especially, and also when Daniel Bryan pulls out moves he hasn't used in a long time. So yeah, I thought it was a very nice match with a very memorable ending. So yeah, that's my justification for a 9 or 10 out of 10. This pay-per-view was, you know what? I would actually recommend buying the DVD when this comes out, because you're gonna get at least 4 matches. Admittedly, you're gonna get some crap like the Wyatt match and the Divas match. But you know what? The stuff that needed to be big, ADR and Christian, fucking Punk versus Lesnar, Cena versus Daniel Bryan, that's all really, really good. I mean, Cody Rhodes and Damien Sandow is obviously just starting, so it's not really all that great. Kane and Bray Wyatt probably should have been better, but it kind of established the dominance of the Wyatt family, and it ended with them carrying Kane away. So I gotta wonder where that's gonna go. You can sort of tell this is intending to continue storylines rather than end them, and I think that's the biggest problem with the show. But you know what? For doing that, this is a pretty damn good SummerSlam. So what would I rate it overall? So 3 really good matches, 2 above average ones, and actually some kind of besides Bray Wyatt being at the beginning, some pretty good match placement. I gotta say that. So I would probably rate this overall. This is tricky. It'd probably be, man, this could be 8, 9, or 10. Like, it kind of depends on how you really want to call it. Punk Lesnar, Ziggler, the Ziggler match, and the John Cena Daniel Bryan match, that was pretty much the last 2 hours. You can pretty much say that the last 2 hours of this 2 hours of this pay-per-view were really, really good. And you know what? Even the match before that was also really good. So you know what? When more than 2/3 of a pay-per-view is really, really good, what can you really say? So I'm going to give this pay-per-view 9 or 10 out of 10. Some pretty damn good matches, which I'm not even sure. I don't know if they're going to be future classics, but damn. This had some pretty dang good matches. So anyway, that's been my opinion on SummerSlam 2013. And what do you guys think? Make sure to leave a comment down below and subscribe if you want to see videos much like these. But anyway, this has been Mr. Sanders, and I'll catch you guys next time.